This is Frank Islam, Chairman and CEO of our investment group and your host of Washington Calling, where we interview leading voices from business and politics that impact you, the viewer. Today, we are fortunate to have a distinguished guest. His name is Ambassador Richard Verma. He's a Vice Chairman at the Asia Group based in Washington, D.C. He previously served as the U.S. Ambassador to India from 2014 to 2017. And he was previously the Assistant Secretary of State for Legislative Affairs. He serves on a number of boards and commissions. Welcome to our show, Mr. Ambassador. It's nice to see you. Thank you for
Frank,
coming.
great to be with you. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. My question to you is how high do you think South Asia will figure in American foreign policy under a Biden administration? And also, what will be the compelling case for the U.S. to have a continued engagement with South Asia? When I say South Asia, I want you to focus on India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan, and talk about the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan as well.
Sure. So it's a great question. And I really hope we can return South Asia to a place of prominence in our foreign policy. And that's where it should be. And I regret to say that it has not been a priority for this administration. You know, for example, we've gone the entire term, Frank, without a Senate confirmed Assistant Secretary of State for South Asia. Can you imagine that? There's been, we have terrific career people, but no presidential appointee to speak for the president. I think that's been noticed. And unfortunately, again, we've been mired in kind of these small trade skirmishes with India after imposing tariffs on them and revoking their trade privilege status. And that seems to have been the focus of our efforts in South Asia. And USTR, the trade rep, has dominated our discourse. And I just don't understand why. Now, when we think about South Asia, a lot of challenges, security challenges, development challenges, but we also think of South Asia as a place of incredible promise.
Yes.
Incredible promise, right? A youth dividend, a demographic dividend, urbanization taking place at rapid rates, innovation, discovery, startups,
very well said.
Incredible educational attainment, infrastructure development. If you just look at what's going on in the region, it's becoming more integrated, and that's reason to be hopeful. But we have to be a partner. We have to be a partner in that exercise, not looking down, not lecturing, not from the outside, but really being an equal partner. And I do think a Biden administration will do that. And Frank, we don't have to guess. You can look at a 40-year record at how Joe Biden has focused on South Asia, worked on South Asia, and we can talk more about that. But I've seen him firsthand do that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. What are the fundamental and ideological differences in Republican Democratic administration's approaches to India and Pakistan? I'll be more interested if you can shed some bright lights on the immigrations, defense, climate change, terrorism, Russia, Iran, China, North Korea, and commerce, trade, and investment, and also promoting our democratic values, which is freedom of press, freedom of faith, and respect for human rights.
Great question. And if I forget some of those issues, just remind me.
I will do that.
I think there used to be a somewhat bipartisan position again, towards India and Pakistan. I think it's important to go back in our history here towards the tail end of the Clinton administration. Around 1998, 1999, after the Kargil crisis, President Clinton made a very determined decision to separate our India policy from our Pakistan policy. He delinked or dehyphenated them. And I think that was exactly the right thing to do. Both were very important countries, but we shouldn't be balancing India off Pakistan and Pakistan off India. And so I think that was the start of this effort to pursue independent policies. Of course, we were worried about the balance of power in Asia, and that meant concerns about a rising China. There was focus on security and regrettably terrorism increasing in the region, problems with cross-border terrorism.
Right.
And so from Clinton to Bush to Obama, and I would even say into the first year of the Trump administration, there was a continuity. There was a continuity, again, about the need for peace and security, particularly in Afghanistan, the need for the people of Pakistan to live peacefully, and not have the military and intelligence apparatus dominate their lives. There was a recognition that India would be the defining partnership for the United States in this century. There was an increasing role of the importance of Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka. Really, this is what I mean when South Asia was so important. And of course, as I said, we were concerned about losing ground to democracy. We were concerned about countervailing pressures that Russia and China were placing. So look, this is a critically important area. And I hope, I know there is a bipartisan interest in supporting South Asia and Pakistan, but we've kind of lost the thread. I hate to say, we've lost the thread. The one area where we have seen some continuity is in the defense side. I give a lot of credit to Pacific Command. This notion of joint strategic vision for South Asia and the Indo-Pacific that President Bush talked about, then President Obama talked about, is now the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy. The Quad is an important part of that. And again, India is a cornerstone of that. So that has been one area of continuity, but we have to build all the elements of our cooperation, all of them.
What do you think of the peace movement that's taking place and the withdrawal of the United States troops from Afghanistan? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a very difficult situation. There's a lot of factors. One, U.S. forces have been there for nearly 20 years now, and I think people are tired and they want to be able to draw down. But we also have an incredibly important security interest in that region, and we have a friend and partner in a democratically elected Afghan government that we want to succeed.
Right.
There's an exceptional amount of concern about giving the Taliban a seat at the table, power sharing. We're not the only ones with that concern. India has a significant concern. And there is a lot of focus on the role that Pakistan will play. Will they play a helpful role? Will they play a, kind of more of a spoiler role? I'm hopeful that they see the interest in an Afghanistan that is peaceful and that is governed by its own people as well. So it's critically important. And the next president, whoever that is really going to have to see this through. Again, with strong partners in the region. India has played a huge role here, providing nearly $4 or $5 billion in development aid, some military assistance in training and equipment. The most important thing is that the people of Afghanistan get to live freely and peacefully without interference from outside players.
That's very well said. That's our hope. Let's talk about what makes Indian Americans so special and what's the reason for their growing profile and their importance of influence in spite of their relatively small numbers compared to many other communities. They have helped shape the United States. Indian Americans are considered the model minorities, but they have been provided a ladders of opportunity to succeed. These are the values of America and strength and qualities of America, inclusiveness and openness that all of us can proudly and truly embrace.
Yeah. Well, look, Frank, you're the epitome of that story.
Well, thank you very much. You are too,
well,
Master.
Well, I don't know. I was able to, I had a lot of people in front of me doing a lot of hard work, including my mom and dad, who gave me every opportunity. And again, I think about, the story of South Asian and Indian American immigration to the United States is a fascinating story. It's not, we don't have generations of it. We just have a generation or two. Right. So it's not that long of a story. And again, my dad came over in 1963. He was on the early side. Now, I know we had people earlier and they went to California and did a lot of hard work, but really the brunt of the people came in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And they just put their heads down. They came here to give their family a better way of life, a hope for a better future. And so what was interesting is that, you know, we kind of joke, they just wanted their kids to go become doctors and engineers and scientists,
Right.
you know, stay out of this public life, stay out of this civic life, because they were so worried about just kind of getting their feet underneath them, getting assimilated, you know, retaining all the great things of their culture, but they didn't want their kids necessarily to be caught up in civic engagement. That has changed.
Very well said.
That has changed dramatically. That has changed dramatically. So, you know, despite every protestation of my parents, I never made it to medical school. I started a career in the military, worked on Capitol Hill, you know, everything, you know, I was kind of bucking the tradition. You know, when I worked on Capitol Hill in the late 80s and early 90s, I could count on one hand the number of Indian American staffers in the House and Senate. Now we have 5 Indian American members of Congress.
Right.
We have an Indian American on the presidential ticket as vice president. So this has been turned on its head, thankfully. And then the number of Indian Americans I see, not only in public, in kind of the public positions, but in civil society, in nonprofits, in academia, you know, at every place in American life, I'm really heartened by that. But I think the one thing I would say is that I do think we have to be careful about assuming that all of us, you know, are in the top 1%, that all of us have made it. And this COVID crisis has really brought out some of the real pain and anguish and struggle. For example, there's a lot of us living on the margins. There's a lot of businesses that did not make it. There's a lot of hotels and restaurants that will not make it. There's a lot of new immigrants who are really struggling. And unfortunately, I don't want to be too negative. Unfortunately, there is this kind of anti-immigrant backlash that politicians are using to for political purpose. You know, a lot of people are scared, so they blame the immigrants. They blame the immigrants for their economic situation or their health situation. We really have to push back and fight back against that with everything we can.
Before I go to my next questions, I wanted to say that I just gave a speech at JFK Library not too long ago, and I quoted, it was an immigration naturalization ceremony that I gave that speech. Immigrants infuse this nation with far horizons and new frontier, thereby keeping the hope alive and well.
Wow.
Very well said. That's President Kennedy's quote. And President Kennedy took a lot of pride, the fact that that his ancestors came during the potato famine from Ireland. So,
you know, it's interesting you mentioned President Kennedy. He was not with us long enough, and he was not president long enough. But when I think about his impact on, for example, on just minority communities,
yes, and civil rights,
and frankly, U.S.-India relations, I think, you know, it's still a bit of an untold story about how strongly he felt about India from the time he was a senator through the time he was president.
Very well said. Since you talk about the Indian diaspora, let's talk about what Indian diaspora can do to help India achieve its fullest potential. They have the character, they have a capacity, and they have a competence to make a difference. And they have made a substantial contribution in people-to-people engagement. You know, the innovations, the entrepreneurship, educations, commerce, investment, and creating companies. What can they do in terms of providing a capital for startup companies creating jobs in India? What are the things they can do to help India?
Yeah, that is a great question. So let me take a step back first and just talk about what brings two countries together, right? You have presidents and prime ministers that can have summits, and you can have formal engagements in Washington, New Delhi, Islamabad, Dhaka, right? But, presidents and prime ministers come and go, governments come and go.
Very well said.
The glue that actually holds countries together are really two things. They are the values that we share together, and they are the people that come back and forth, that migrate back and forth, that travel back and forth, that do business back and forth. That is the actual glue that brings us together. And without those values and without those people, the government-to-government relationships are critically important, but they are somewhat hollow. They are somewhat hollow if you don't have the people fully connected. And we are lucky. We are lucky that South Asians in the United States and India in the United States are really connected with shared values. And so you ask about what we can do. I don't think this is a one-way ticket. This isn't about what can American companies do in India. I look at the great promise, for example, again, this tragedy of COVID, I look at what's happening in joint vaccine research and discovery. I look at what we could do from a global health security standpoint between our industries, between our scientists, between our research laboratories. Yes, the government can help steer that a little bit, but ultimately that will be up to individuals and institutions in the private sector, civil society, and academic sector. I look at climate change, and I look at the impact, particularly a place like Bangladesh and parts of India, and the water shortages. Look, we are impacted from climate change in a real way. That's why India went into the Paris Climate Agreement the way it did, negotiated a very important deal. That's why the United States was in. But ultimately, the work on moving to renewables, meeting those aggressive targets, those are done by the private sector, right? I look at the infrastructure needs in India, the massive urbanization taking place, the building of airports, high-speed rail, the building of smart cities.
Very well
So
said.
those are all things that are going to be done not by governments. Those are going to be done by private sector, by private industry. And again, if you look at our economy, we need the greatest kind of Indian companies, Indian entrepreneurs coming here. Again, that's why I'm so concerned about this kind of, discouragement or disinterest in having some of the best and the brightest come here. And also I'm concerned about, removing family-based immigration.
Right.
My family would not have made it here. I certainly would not have been able to go back 50 years later to represent the United States and India, but for family-based immigration policies that's humane, that is just, that is consistent with the social compact of America. You work hard, you play by the rules, the next generation can do just a little bit better.
Very well said. You aim high, work hard, and pursue your dream.
Right.
How do you describe the US-India relationship from the time you were our ambassador to India and now? Do you believe the US-India relationship has bipartisan support, which was not true even a decade ago? Do you believe the India relationship under the Biden administration will reach the next height, and we will strengthen, broaden, and deepen our engagement with India based on shared interests and shared values, as you said?
Yeah. I think it's bipartisan, yes. In fact, I would almost say US-India relations is a nonpartisan issue. I think everyone understands how important it is. But as I said earlier, I've been disappointed by the kind of transactional nature of the last 3.5 years. I mean, I think the photo ops are important, but they are not sufficient. And again, we think about what's happened to the denigration of minorities. I worry about that a lot. And I worry about some of the strategic choices. Foreign Minister of India talks about strategic choices. I think both India and the United States have to make strategic choices that bring us closer together. We can't just assume that our kind of 18, 19-year upward trajectory in the relationship just continues on its own. We have to make those choices that actually bring us together. Now, look, neither country aspires to have a military alliance. That's not what we're talking about. But we are talking about something built for this century, not for the last century.
Very
And you
well
asked
said.
me about Vice President Biden. I was with Vice President Biden in 2006 in the Senate when he said this. He said, if in 2020, the two closest partners and friends in the world are India and the United States, then the world will be a safer place.
Very well said.
He made that prediction 15 years ago. So I know that this will be a focus for him going forward. He understands how important the relationship is, and it won't just happen. It won't just go up on its own. It will require a lot of work and a lot of dedication, and I think you'll see that from him.
You had mentioned not too long ago that India had, the military alliance with the U.S. As you know, that India has no interest in joining the military alliance, but they need the alliance, I believe, against China. And India remains a close partner with the Soviet Union. Can you shed some light on this thing? Does that make a difference to America's long-term strategy in terms of Indo-Pacific region?
Look, I think not only does India not want a military alliance, the United States does not want a formal military alliance. And the reality is we haven't entered into a military alliance in decades with anyone.
That is true.
The alliances we entered into were a post-World War II architecture. They were the right agreements at the right time to keep the peace in Europe, to keep the peace in the Indo-Pacific. What we need now is something much more agile, that takes into account all the elements of our cooperation, not just military. The military component's very important. So just take India for an example. We need full-scale cooperation militarily, economically. That means maybe doing a trade agreement, a bilateral investment treaty. That means having cooperation on climate, on global health, on immigration. We need a clear set of agreements. It's this on students and higher education, on space cooperation, on, research about the oceans. Frank, I could go on and on. My point is we need something comprehensive that creates a stickiness, a glue between us, where even if some leader wanted to shake us apart, that person, regardless of party, couldn't do it because we were so interlinked in so many ways. That's what a modern alliance looks like. In fact, I'll use the words of Prime Minister Modi and previous BJP leaders when they called us natural allies.
Very well said.
Natural allies means we take all the elements of our cooperation, we put it together, and we build something very, very strong.
As we close our conversation, I want to talk a little bit about I'm a big fan of civic engagement because I have Frank Islam Civic Engagement Institute and our cultural exchanges that have taken a backseat in India-US discourse, not just because of the pandemic. And I remember fondly when I served on the board of trustees, the Kennedy Centers of the cultural exchange between India and United States. What do you think we can take the steps and the avenues that can be taken and working with philanthropists and working with arts and culture to have that exchange program between the United States and India?
It's so important, so important. And I'm so glad you raised this area because again, we tend to look at what military system did we buy or sell, what trade did we do? But I get back to, the kind of values and glue that holds us together. It's in the arts, it's in culture, it's in education. And I give Prime Minister Modi a lot of credit for pushing a lot of Indian soft power around the world. And I look at what Indian Americans and South Asians have done in this country, in the arts, in acting, in drama, on stage, on screen, on music, on cooking, writing, poetry.
Right.
I think of my dad's own experience, a professor of English literature, but really a South Asian literaturist, an expert who has brought, the great South Asian authors and philosophers to life here for students in Pennsylvania and around the country. That's exactly what we should be doing because there are some incredible ideas ideas about justice and inclusion, about diversity, about tolerance, about
Very well said.
building each generation a little stronger and better than the prior. So many of those lessons come from our literature, come from our art. And I just think this is an incredibly important part of our relationship. You asked a very specific question. Our government can do some parts here. You know,
Yeah.
our State Department can do more in the exchange areas. Our higher education institutions can do more. Ultimately, we're going to have to get the populations of our two countries, though, to really continue to do what they've been doing. And I think this is where we can shine. South Asians, Indian Americans, and Americans of all kinds. I think that we're naturally drawn to each other in this area.
Very well said. As you probably know, that before I leave this interview, I want to quote what President Kennedy said, art nourishes the roots of our culture.
Yeah.
And he said it very well. And that's exactly what's at stake. And art connects us, engages us, and art represents the best of our humanity.
Yeah, I'll give you one other President Kennedy quote, which is slightly different, but he talked about during a very difficult time, 1959, I think. He said, "The hinge of fate in Asia rests with India."
Very well said.
The hinge of fate in Asia rests with India. And I tend to agree with that. And I think that remains even more true today. And I think, again, the work that you're doing and that so many others are doing to build ties, not only with India, but all of South Asia, I think is so, so important. So I want to thank you for everything you've done over many decades to pull our country closer to a critically important region of the world.
We all have to do our part. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for being here, for taking your time to interview us. And this is Frank Islam wishing you a great week. Thank you for watching.